You know, my takeaway of the general discussion of that over time has been that inflation is an important policy target and continues to be, but it can't be the only one, the exclusive focus of central banks or somebody else who's, you know, responsible for thinking about the stability of the system. But I do think that if one is worried about the stability of systems as complex as our financial systems, focusing on inflation, I think, is quite clearly not, it's fine, but it's not enough. Well, their situation is that they responded to the crisis extremely well. They recovered faster than any of us expected and are back, you know, for the most part to pre-crisis levels of growth. It looks like that's sustainable, even if the advanced countries are limping along. Now, if you want to calibrate, you know, the degree of increasing independence from the advanced countries, I would say a major downturn in Europe or North America would clearly produce at least a dent in their growth rate. So you could call it partial decoupling or increasing independence. Much of this is new. I mean, it wouldn't have been true 10 years ago. It's a function of the rising aggregate size of the emerging markets in the global economy, their rising incomes, which makes their demand more interesting from a domestic production point of view, and the intra-EM group trade is high and rising. And all of those things are increasing their ability to sustain growth on their own. Inflation is a very important problem for them, and the rising commodity prices on round two are a major headache because they have a bigger impact on inflation in the developing countries, and they have distributional impacts that are quite adverse. They hurt the poor most, and it's easy to see why. I mean, in many poor countries, the poorer people in the country spend as much as 50% of their income on food. If you have a major increase in the price of food, the de facto effect is to reduce incomes among the most vulnerable people. So that's a very important concern. And one of the lessons of the crisis for the emerging markets is they need to pay more attention to pre-built mechanisms that allow them to redistribute, you know, income or support of a variety of kinds in the face of shocks. And the alternative is to adopt sort of policies they know aren't really ideal because they have to. So in the last kind of food commodity price spike, just before the crisis hit, India, which is one of the two largest exporters of rice in the world, along with Thailand, imposed export controls. Now, the Indians are very sophisticated, and they knew perfectly well that wasn't the right answer, but they didn't have a way to protect the poor parts of the population, which are large still, in India from the kind of commodity price spike. And so I think you'll see these mechanisms. The defensive measures in general are going to get a higher priority in emerging markets, and they know perfectly well. They learned bitter lessons in the crises in the late 90s, and it stood them in very good stead on this round. Low debt, low external debt, fiscal health for the most part, reserves, self-insurance of a variety of kinds. It really made a huge difference, and in addition to just management competence at the policy level. The most interesting process underway, as far as I'm concerned, in the emerging markets is the very complex middle-income transition that's going on in China. Really just starting, and just a huge amount, you know, rests on the success of this. I mean, the emerging markets of China as their major export partner, you know, Korea, India, Brazil. You know, if China slows down, it'll show up literally all over the place. So getting this one right and being one of the 5 or 6 countries that managed the middle income transition at high speed is going to be one of the main events in the global economy in China. The rest of the world, I think, my own take on the developed countries is a little bit probably different from others. I think that the fiscal situation presents risks and has to be sorted out. I imagine we'll muddle through, but maybe we won't, and we'll have a kind of mini crisis either in Europe or America or both. But beyond that, I think what's going to happen is that the growth will sort of struggle back, but the employment problem will remain. That is, I think for the first time in the post-war period, which is the period in which, you know, the emerging economies sort of rejoined the party, for the first time I think that the growth and employment in the advanced countries are going to diverge. And so we can't assume the employment will come back or the income distribution will go the way we want it to in the advanced countries just because the growth is coming back. And I think the reason for that is that the growth is going to come in, at least in the tradable sector, in areas where we have comparative advantage, and that set of things is very healthy but narrowing structurally in the advanced economies as various parts of the global supply chains move elsewhere. And so I really do think, I mean, nobody knows for sure, but I think we're in for a period in which we have to deal separately with sort of employment opportunities, with income distribution on the one hand and growth on the other.